So you're about to make a brilliant coffee decision and buy a Gaggia Classic, and you want to do it secondhand because you understand that's the way to save some money. However, there are machines that you definitely want to avoid, and in this video we're going to break down what those are and how to spot them. And if you're new here, my name's Billy, I make coffee videos and I really enjoy it. So if that's your kind of thing, make sure you're following because I would really appreciate it. So first off, what are the Gaggia Classics that we need to avoid? Well, I'm going to separate them into two groups, the original Gaggia Classic and the Gaggia Classic Pro. Now let's start by looking at the Gaggia Classic Original. Now this came in two forms, the version 1 or V1 and the version 2 or V2. Now the version 1 was heralded as the best machine that they've ever made, and to be honest I think that's true to a certain extent now. The parts of it were very logical, thought through, and it was just sort of simple plumbing put together in a well organized fashion. Now Gaggia wanted to improve upon the V1 and changed the boiler from an aluminium material to a steel material. Their thoughts were that this would reduce the risk of corrosion because steel is more inert than aluminium. However, for some reason, when they changed from the aluminium to the steel boiler, they removed one of the components of the machine called a three-way solenoid valve. Now, that's just a part of the machine that controls the flow of water. It usually brings water from the water supply and controls whether it goes to the brew head when you're brewing coffee or switches off and goes into the outlet pipe into the waste. Now, that's important because it can control pressure in the puck when you're brewing coffee really effectively, and it's also a major part that makes these machines modifiable. Now, the modifications you can do to these machines are really stupendous. You can make some insane modifications to these machines and turn them into something that kind of makes average coffee and something that makes great coffee. Now, the reason most people get a Gaggia Classic is because you can modify them. In their stock form, they've got a pretty bad control of temperature and pressure, and when you modify them, they can have fantastic control. And that's what makes them popular. Now, the V2, lacking that solenoid valve, means that you don't have as much control over what modifications you can do to the machine. So if you can't modify them, the large appeal of having a Gaggia Classic is sort of gone, and it doesn't make sense to buy one. But the thing is, they both look kind of similar. There's only subtle differences, and a lot of people will buy a Gaggia Classic online and not realize until they're trying to modify it that it lacks that component, the solenoid valve, that makes it modifiable. So how do we spot this? Well, the Gaggia Classic V2 has a few different sort of characteristics. But the first thing you're going to want to look at is the label. Now the label, if it's a Gaggia Classic V2, will have two different codes on it, SIN035U and the second one being R19403. Now there are some Gaggia Classics produced in 2015 before the switch to the version 2. Now these will not have this label on, but they may still have the date 2015, so it's always worth checking. Now a lot of sellers will omit putting the label picture on their listings because they know they can make more money if they fool someone. I don't agree with that practice and I think it's kind of shitty. But what are the other things you can look at? Well, the biggest giveaway is the buttons. Now the buttons on a V2 are push in. The buttons on a V1 are rocker switches. The buttons on a V2 have the red light above the symbol and the V1 have the red light below the symbol. They also just don't look as nice and they're a bit clunky. Some people will put videos of their listing on and you can just see them pushing in the button, and that's a dead giveaway. Now the next thing you can look at is there any sign that this three-way solenoid valve has an outlet? Now the outlet is a sort of metal tube and it will flow kind of into the back left of the drip tray. It's really obvious once you spot it, but sometimes listings will just show a picture of a Gaggia Classic without that tube, and that's because it kind of comes out and you clean it and it's all merry. So have a look at the other photos because that metal tube might just be sitting along next to the portafilters. But also have a double check. If you can't see that, if the buttons look bad, if you see those numbers and codes on the label, then it's a V2 and you want to avoid it. And with that, let's move on to the Gaggia Classic Pro. In 2019, Gaggia moved away from the steel boiler in the V2 and went back to producing the aluminium boiler present in the V1. Now, aside from the boiler going back, they changed the layout and look of the machine slightly, but all in all, the machine was pretty similar and very easy to modify. This made the Gaggia Classic Pro kind of resurrect their reputation that was slightly parred by the V2. Now, I think Gaggia's commitment to improving it and listening to the fan base was kind of admirable, but they did have this kind of desire to improve the risk of corrosion within the aluminium boiler. And in 2023, they released the Gaggia Classic Pro Evo. Now, for some reason, they really wanted to correct the errors of the aluminium boiler in that it still was quite corrosive. So they decided to coat it in a material called Excelia 3010/B242. Now, this is a food-safe coating that was designed to just sort of act as a non-stick coating that would prevent the buildup of scale and stop corrosion of the aluminium boiler. However, soon after manufacturing and distribution, Gaggia were noting that consumers were having a real problem with this coating. It wasn't adhesing well to the boiler and instead was coming out in flakes within their frothed milk. Now, this is pretty bad. You don't want to have flakes of this material in your coffee drink. That's just not okay. And Gaggia decided actually they agreed. Now, they never admitted to this not being food safe. It had all the right FDA certifications, but they did note that having flakes of it in your boiler was not okay. So what they did is they decided to revert back to just having an aluminium boiler. And then the next year in 2024, they released a brass boiler. Now, they didn't ask for any extra money. And I think this is a nice way of saying, hey, look, we made a mistake and this is the final solution that we did try and cheap out on for many years, but now we're offering it for the same price as a Gaggia Evo. And if you had one of those affected flaky boilers, they'd either replace it with an aluminium or a brass boiler. And I think that's kind of fair enough. It shows their care, but in any case, you don't want to be buying one that's secondhand that had this flaky boiler, because it's just not nice to have flakes of rubbish come out in your coffee. You just want a machine to make coffee and not have to worry about inspecting it all the time. So what are you looking for to avoid buying a Gaggia Classic Pro Evo secondhand online? Well, you're going to have to err on the side of caution here, I'm afraid. If you can't see the label and can't confirm that it's not an Evo, you're going to have to look at it in person, because you want to make sure that you can't see any flakes when it's working. And also, a very quick tell is to just go to the back of the machine, have a look through that little grate in the back, shine a light in there, and if you can see any brass on the boiler, you know you're safe. If you've got aluminium there, it's going to be a gamble on your part. The boilers are easy to change. However, it's just whether you're willing to put in that work to do it and whether you're willing to pay the price that the seller is asking, given that it's an aluminium boiler. So on my phone, I've got a couple of listings. Let's just work through them together. So here we've got a Gaggia Classic Espresso machine listed at £90. And from the face of it, it looks okay. But when we look at it, we can see that the buttons, they've got that red light on the top, and they also look push in, but you can't quite tell fully. And also looking at the drip tray, you can't actually see the outlet pipe of the OPV. So immediately my suspicions are raised. Have a look at the original picture. Now this one doesn't show any OPV outlet pipe, which makes me think this is one of the affected V2s. I also can't see the pipe anywhere else in the picture. So for me, this is a V2 and I'm going to avoid it completely. Okay, so here we have a Gaggia Classic Espresso coffee machine listed for £220. In the description, we can see it says pre-2015 machine. I can see that the buttons are rocker switches, and I can also see that it's got the OPV outlet pipe, which means this is a V1 Gaggia Classic. Now, would I buy this straight away? Well, I'm not sure. It's £220. It's quite a lot of money. I would be asking the seller, hey, can I use tap water in this? And if the seller says, oh yeah, tap water is absolutely fine, that means this boiler has probably had tap water in it, which means it's probably got a lot of scale and it might need replacing, especially if it's an older machine. You're more than welcome to open up that boiler yourself and have a look, But you got a question, is this actually worth £220? It's about £200 less than buying one new. I'm not sure if I'd buy it. Okay, final example. Here is a Gaggia Classic Espresso machine for £200, and the seller has kindly put a little video on the listing there. And you can already see she's pushing in the buttons, and that coffee is flowing out, I don't know, worse than me after a curry on a Friday. That looks like bad coffee, and you can't see, obviously, at the back an OPV outlet. The buttons have the lights at the top, and all in all, this is showing clear signs that it's a V2, and you do not want this. Now, this listing also says that this is the highly sought after legendary original model made in Italy with the three-way solenoid valve, a true workhorse. That is a straight up lie, and you want to be cautious of that, because these are the kind of listings that fill you with confidence because you read the bio and it says, oh, this is the one you want. But actually, this is going to make you a bad cup of coffee, and it's also £200 for a V2 that you can't modify. It's not worth it, don't buy it. So I hope you found that helpful, and it's armed you with some things to look out for when you go and buy your secondhand Gaggia Classic ready to modify and create fantastic coffee with. I've really appreciated having you here, so if you want, chuck me a thumbs up or subscribe. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.